So I want to start by talking about China's economic rise. And this rise, relative rise, has been accelerated since the Western financial crisis. Basically, for one simple reason, and that is the rich world, including Japan, but basically the Western economies, have more or less declined initially and then stagnated. And only very, very recently have they begun to grow, most notably the American economy. But some are still smaller than they were in 2008. And then if we look at China's growth, then one can see a very diverse experience. China is now, at the end of this period, which is 2011, China was a third bigger than it was on the eve of the Western financial crisis. So if we move on to the effects of the financial crisis on the relative rise of China. When I did the book, I used Goldman Sachs' projections, which were done in 2007, which suggested that China would overtake the American GDP in 2027. Now, this chart is different. It was done by The Economist about a couple of years ago, and it was based on a range of different projections. So it was a sort of consensual exercise, if you like. And the conclusion, the red lines here are where China's already overtaken the United States in various areas. And the blue lines are where China is still behind the United States. The really relevant one for this talk is this purple line here, which is GDP at market exchange rates. And the projection now is that rather than overtaking the United States in 2027, China is likely to overtake the United States around about 2018, which is very imminent. The first is that China is an enormous trader. It is the biggest exporting nation in the world and the second biggest importing nation in the world, which combined means that China now is the biggest trading nation in the world. Well, all the countries coloured green, you can't see what they are. So let me get my map, which is a much better way. This map illustrates the point very clearly. All the countries that are coloured red, China is the largest trading partner in the world. All the countries that are coloured orange, China is the second largest trading partner in the world. All the countries that are coloured yellow, China is either the third biggest or the fourth biggest or what have you. So you can see, from over a 20-year span, how China's become extraordinarily integrated into the world economy and has become this enormously influential trading nation. But it's not just in trade. If you take, China is emerging also as a very significant financial power. In 2009 and 2010, two Chinese banks, the China Development Bank and the China Export-Import Bank, between them, lent more to the developing world than the World Bank, which was the institution established after 1945 as one of the pillars of the American economic order to lend, in particular, to the developing world. And the key area here was trade. What currency do you pay for trade? Now, at the moment, of course, the overwhelmingly dominant currency for trade is the American dollar, followed, but much less important, by the euro. And this process is just beginning. You can see in 2009, hardly any Chinese trade was paid, exports or imports, was paid for in the renminbi. But by 2013, 18% of Chinese trade was being paid for in the renminbi, and it's projected that maybe by about 2020 or earlier than that, a third of Chinese trade, and remember Chinese trade is now the biggest single trade of any nation in the world, will be paid for in the renminbi. Overall, do you think the influence China is having on our country is a good thing, a bad thing, or neither good nor bad? And you'll see that the red is bad and the blue is good. And even if you can't read the figures, you can see how long the line is. And you can see that apart from, in this table here, apart from the countries at the bottom, which are, sorry, the last two, isn't it? Last three, Philippines, Mexico, and Argentina register a negative, but all the other countries register a positive. And I think this is quite a widespread view. Of course, there are losers in the situation, but most countries in the world have benefited, often some of them benefited a great deal from China's rise. Okay. And just to illustrate the point in a different way, here's another bar chart which is, the question is it more, this is an interesting question, is it more important for your country to have strong ties with China or the United States? Strong ties isn't necessarily economic ties. People might interpret it in some countries as essentially, you know, about security, about fear of China's military rise, which I think is would be true in the case of Japan. But what is interesting is, I think 10 years ago, China would not feature anything like this. It would have been regarded as much less important, probably by I think by every country in this survey, than the United States. But already, you know, the red line is China, the blue line is the United States, and you can see on this side already a really significant number of countries, minority in this survey, regard China to be more important to them than the United States. So the world we're moving into is not a world of a singular modernity. The world we're moving into is a world of hybrid modernities, of a plural modernity in a pluralistic sense. And this will certainly be true of China. This will be certainly true of China. Now, I think that in trying to understand what China is going to be like, we have to understand what are the key features of China. And the first one is, well, yeah, it's true. It's true. China is a nation state. It's true. But it's only called itself a nation state since 1900. In other words, it's been a nation state for roughly 100 years. But even those with a minimal knowledge of China knows that China is a lot older than that. Now, the key point here is that the way the Chinese understand what it means to be Chinese, the way they understand China is not derived from the last 100 years of being a nation state. Of course it's not. Those things that give the Chinese their sense of what it means to be Chinese are a product of that 2,000-year history of Chinese civilization. Confucian values, very distinctive conception of the family, very unusual relationship, really an interesting relationship between the state and society, which to this day we don't understand, and we've made precious little effort, in my view, to understand. I think the belief in the West, and probably here, is that the great Achilles heel of China, is the state, is government. That basically the government is not representative of the people, that it does not enjoy legitimacy. Because in our view, the legitimacy of government is now essentially a function of democracy. And by democracy, we mean universal suffrage and a multi-party system. Now, clearly, China doesn't have either of those, and it doesn't therefore have democracy in anything like a Western style. It doesn't have democracy in a Western style form, full stop. End of story? No. No, it's not the end of the story. Because you're then faced with the question that it is clear that the Chinese state does enjoy a great deal of legitimacy in the eyes of the Chinese. And that is, the Chinese, remember the crucial importance of civilization state in the eyes of the Chinese, they see the role of government first and foremost, even before economic performance in the long run, in my view. They believe that the role of the state is as the embodiment, the expression, and the defender of Chinese civilization, the civilization state, and the unity of that civilization. What is China going to be like as a great power? Well, of course, the answer is we've got no idea, really. We're all in the realms of speculation. And beyond a point, I would say the Chinese are in the same situation. They don't know either, because they've never had a chance to think about it. Because when you're rushing, like the other East Asian tigers, rushing, trying to escape poverty, grow as quickly as possible, and enter an era of prosperity, that is the overwhelming priority in the minds of the people, in the minds of the government, and the rest of it. So they have given also, I think, relatively little attention to this question. Now, well, will China be like the United States? Well, certainly a bit like the United States, certainly a bit. Because we're living in a globalized world, shared problems, shared values, shared norms, so inevitably there will be a certain and serious overlap between the way the United States has conducted the international system and the way China might conduct the international system. But I also think the differences will be very profound. But internationally, I don't think we should expect any great changes in the international system in the short run. In the long run, I think we should. But China has no reason or need or desire to fundamentally change the international system. It thinks the international system works okay. It's quite pleased with the role of the United States because that umbrella has also enabled it to grow so quickly. But as China becomes more and more becomes increasingly strong, it will develop new kinds of interests. And I think what we'll see is an international system in which China is increasingly a major architect and shaper. I think we'll see the witness of the formation of new institutions which will be added to the existing institutions and may replace them. But I don't think the Chinese will go about it in the old Soviet style. They won't go for, or the French would say, force de frappe. They won't go for cataclysmic change or revolutionary change. On the contrary, I think the Chinese are essentially incrementalists, gradualists, and pragmatists. Of course, we're all guessing about China's economic prospects because actually none of us know the answer. I personally am pretty optimistic for China for the next 20 years. If you ask me to go beyond 20 years, I don't know. And the reason, I mean, sometimes people have said, well, will China go the way of Japan and the end of the bubble and so on? And I think I've always thought that was a false analogy because China is at such a lower level of development than Japan was when it was confronted with the problems of the bubble economy, and it's still, in terms of GDP per head, much poorer. So I think that there's still a powerful catch-up factor for China to take advantage of, so that's why I'm not excessively optimistic. I do think there's going to be lots of problems. I don't think the growth rate is going to be as strong as it's been. I think the growth rate in the long run will continue to decline, but I still think that China is going to show significant economic growth.